natural hormones, synthetic hormones, bioidentical hormones. Literally everyone I have ever heard talk or write about hormones has used these terms incorrectly. I kind of have a soapbox that I'm standing on today that's all about the imprecise use of these terms. I'm going to clarify once and for all the difference between natural hormones, synthetic hormones, and bioidentical hormones. Now, I will say at the outset that there is some overlap. There's quite a bit of overlap between those terms, but I don't feel like it's helpful. I feel like a lot of patients especially are confused by the terms. And so I hear a lot of physicians, nurse practitioners, physicians' assistants using these terms incorrectly. So I want to help clarify all three of those terms and really help us all understand how we need to be using those terms. I want to look at some specific hormones and really explain how each of them fits within these terms. I'm Steve Goldring from simplehormones.com. I help patients and healthcare practitioners with easy to understand patient education resources. Most of those are about hormones and hormone optimization. This particular video is a resource that can help you maybe understand a little bit more about the terms that are often thrown around in regard to hormones and hormone optimization, which in my personal experience feels very confusing because they don't always line up with the actual reality of what those terms mean. My wife and I had a friend who was a pastor and a professor of theology at Calvin University in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He spent his life with words in Hebrew, in Greek, in German, because a lot of theological texts are written in German, as well as, of course, in English. And he had a very interesting statement that he said personally to us. And he said that words don't have meanings, they have uses. And so that's always stuck with me, that words are defined by the way we use them. The Oxford English Dictionary is the world's authority on English words. The word natural, as defined in the OAD, has the following definition: existing in or derived from nature, not made or caused by humankind. The word natural comes from the Old French, from the original Latin naturalis, which means natura, or birth, nature, or quality. The OED talks about synthetic. The first definition is about a substance made by chemical synthesis, especially to imitate a natural product. The origin of synthetic is from the late 17th century, so that would be around 1680 something. That was based on the French, it goes back to the Latin, and it also goes back to the Greek. So one of the things that we look at when we look at etymologies and the derivation of words is, where did that word first appear? And the word bioidentical is a little hard to pin down. The first time the word bioidentical appeared, at least in PubMed, which is basically a database of published journal articles, was in about 2001 in Advanced Nurse Practitioner, in an article entitled Bioidentical Hormone Replacement Therapy, a Natural Option for Perimenopause and Beyond by C.R. Walker. So the term bioidentical really means exactly the same chemical structure as hormones found in your body. So we can look at these hormones in some general categories. What I'd like to look at is some hormones that are actually natural, but they are not bioidentical. The first is called Armour Thyroid. Armour Thyroid is a thyroid replacement hormone that contains a couple of different human hormones. Those human hormones are T4, or levothyroxine, and T3, or liothyronine. Armour Thyroid, NP Thyroid, and any of the other brands of thyroid replacement products come from desiccated pork thyroid glands. Desiccated is a word that just means it dried. So essentially, in the butchering process of pork, the thyroid gland is removed from the pig, and then it is dried, and through some process, which is not really a chemical process, it's more of a physical process, that dried thyroid gland is ground up into a fine powder, and then it's added into a tablet form. There are some other ingredients that are added to it to make it into a solid tablet. But essentially, that thyroid medication, or those two thyroid hormones, are not chemically synthesized. They're extracted, rather, from the dried thyroid gland of pigs. The bottom line is that Armour Thyroid and NP Thyroid and other similar animal-derived thyroid hormones are natural, they are not synthetic, and they can't be considered bioidentical because of the other contaminating hormones that may be in them. The second hormone that I want to look at is called Premarin. Premarin also goes by the generic name conjugated equine estrogens. Now, conjugated equine estrogens are natural. They come from a natural source. That natural source, believe it or not, is the urine of pregnant mares. There are a couple of hormone drugs that came on the market probably over 50 or 60 years ago. One is called Pergonal and another is called Menopause. Those are hormones that are primarily used in fertility treatments, but they are derived from the urine of Catholic nuns with the express permission of the Pope. Premarin was developed in the 1940s by basically taking the urine of pregnant mares, drying it, and creating a tablet. Now, the urine of pregnant mares is a completely natural source of hormones. It is completely natural. It does not rely on chemical synthesis. There's a way that I know Premarin is a naturally sourced product. I have personally taken a Premarin tablet and cut it in half and smelled it. Smells, oddly enough, like horse pee. Very strongly, I might add. Now, if that's not a natural product, I don't know what is. So I hear so many people, especially doctors, YouTubers, bloggers, health experts, talking about Premarin being a synthetic hormone. It is not a synthetic hormone. It's actually a hormone that comes from a natural source. The natural source where Premarin comes from is the urine of pregnant mares. It is not a synthetic hormone. It is not made by chemical synthesis. It is also not bioidentical because it has a little bit of the hormones found in human ovaries and in human bloodstreams, but only a very small amount. The primary human estrogen is called estradiol. And Premarin has maybe 5% estradiol. It also contains a little larger amount of a hormone called estrone, which is a human estrogen. But in addition to those, it has up to 10, possibly 17, maybe even as high as 60 different estrogens, the vast majority of which are not found in humans at all, but are really horse estrogens and metabolites, or so-called breakdown products of those horse estrogens. So the bottom line for Premarin is it is natural. It is not synthetic, in spite of what many, many people will say, and it is not bioidentical, which is why there may be some problems. I consider Premarin to be somewhat of a dirty drug. It has a lot of contaminants. We don't even know what all the contaminants are in Premarin because no one has ever explicitly published an exact breakdown of all of the ingredients of Premarin. Now, that would never happen in today's pharmaceutical industry, but Premarin is a very old drug, over 75 years old, and so it kind of gets by, kind of grandfathered in, if you will, so that we don't really need to know, supposedly, what the actual ingredients are. So Armour Thyroid and Premarin are both natural, they're not synthetic, but they're also not bioidentical. Okay, I'm going to look at another category of hormones that are synthetic and not natural, but they are bioidentical. So when we take a look at estradiol, that is the most prominent human estrogen. It's also the one that is the most effective, the most helpful for things like hot flashes and night sweats and irritability and weight gain. It's the most helpful for things like vaginal dryness and vaginal atrophy that's caused by menopause and the loss of hormones. When we look at estradiol, what we can say it is not from a natural source. All of the estradiol that's on the market is from a chemical synthetic source. Estradiol is not natural. It is completely synthetic. And it is also bioidentical, meaning that the estradiol that is produced by chemical synthesis is exactly the same chemical structure as the estradiol produced in the ovaries. Now, progesterone is another hormone that is not naturally produced. There is no natural source, in spite of what so many people believe, including the majority of doctors that I listen to. Doctors, if you hear a doctor on YouTube talk about natural progesterone, that is really using the language imprecisely, because progesterone is only really available through a synthetic chemical process. It does not come from a natural source. There are no plants and no animals that we can derive progesterone from. Progesterone is not available naturally. It is only available through chemical synthesis, at least not in economically viable amounts. Let me emphasize this. Plants do not make hormones. Period. No matter what anyone says. Progesterone is also, not only is it not natural, it is also synthetic. And thirdly, it is bioidentical. Progesterone that doesn't have any chemical additions to its structure is identical to the progesterone made in the corpus luteum, which is a part of the ovary that's left behind after ovulation. That's the primary place that progesterone comes from in the human body. Now, ethanyl estradiol is a chemically synthesized version of estradiol that has an ethanyl group added to its chemical structure. Now, what that does is it makes ethanyl estradiol more potent, more powerful, but it also, more importantly, makes ethanyl estradiol have some different characteristics when it's given to women. It is actually used as a birth control. Ethanyl estradiol is not natural. Ethanyl estradiol is only made available by chemical synthesis, but it is also not bioidentical. Medroxyprogesterone sounds a lot like progesterone, but we have that medroxy group, which is a slight chemical addition to the structure of progesterone. Medroxyprogesterone is not natural. There is no natural source of medroxyprogesterone. It can only be produced through chemical synthesis. So it is, by definition, synthetic. It is also not bioidentical. And because it's not bioidentical, it has a lot of different behaviors that come out when it's used in human females. Now, what we've seen in the Women's Health Initiative is that women given medroxyprogesterone had an increased risk of breast cancer, as well as multiple other things, blood clots and several other. There are several studies which illustrate, especially one called the EPIC cohort study, which is done in France in the 2000s, that showed that progesterone, synthetic progesterone that is bioidentical, does not behave the same way medroxyprogesterone does, and in fact protects women against breast cancer. I want to encourage all of us to be much more precise in the way we use these terms: natural, synthetic, and bioidentical, and to recognize that there are situations, probably the majority of situations, where the type of hormone that is best and most valuable is actually a synthetic hormone that is also a bioidentical hormone, and it is not from a natural source. Now, I'm not saying that natural source hormones are all bad. There can be some use for them. In the future, if you hear someone talking about natural hormones, about synthetic hormones, or about bioidentical hormones, you'll have a better idea of what they should say and what they should mean when they use those particular terms. If this video has been helpful at all, click the like and subscribe buttons, and you might want to click the little bell to get notified anytime I post a new video. Hey, thanks so much for watching, and I'll look forward to talking to you again very soon.